Hi, I'm Nairy, and in this video I'll be taking you through one method to clear a 500 Invocation Tombs of Amascut raid to obtain the Cursed Phalanx. This video forms one of a series of videos I'm releasing on the Tombs of Amascut raid, so if you would like more information on this video, guide, or any of the other content that I work on, click more info on the movie information box on YouTube to learn more. Also be sure to subscribe by clicking the subscribe button to the right to be automatically notified as I release new guides. Now, much like the Inferno, a Tombs of Amascut raid at a raid level of 500 is a battle of attrition. You must be able to manage your supplies as much as possible where it is easier to do so in order to save them for where it really counts. But unlike the Inferno, you'll be pleased to know that the skill floor is much lower in a 500 raid level Tombs of Amascut raid. What I want to show you is that the skill level to obtain a Cursed Phalanx is actually much lower than you may think. Sure, it is challenging, but you can make your way through the encounters just by doing the basics as normal. This guide is set up to get you your first 500 clear. It might not be the most efficient way, but it's about as easy as it is going to get. You don't need to Red X and you don't need to Butterfly to get your Phalanx. For this video, I'll be making 3 assumptions. The first is that we'll assume you're familiar with the basic mechanics of each encounter and how each of the invocations affect the encounters inside the Tombs of Amascut. The second is that you'll have access to a yellow Keris, also known as a Keris Partisan of the Sun. And the third is that you will also have access to a Tumakan Shadow. If these assumptions don't hold true to you, you should look to reconsider whether attempting a 500 raid level Tombs of Amascut raid is the right time for you, as ultimately without a yellow Keris, a Tumakan Shadow, or understanding at least the basic mechanics and principle behind each invocation, you're putting yourself at a significant disadvantage when attempting to clear the raid at this high of an invocation. The DPS of the Shadow over the second best in slot for almost all of the options available is just too great of a step change in DPS to pass up, and with the invocation setup I'm recommending on using, a yellow Keris is a must. This isn't to say it's impossible without a Shadow or a yellow Keris, but if you're set on doing it anyway, I'd recommend on watching another guide. First off, I'll cover a few key points. The boss rotation, then go into the invocations, gear setup, then finally a walkthrough for each of the bosses and what you should be doing. As it is a battle of attrition, you must be able to manage your supplies, and your ability to do that will really depend on 5 key areas. Clearly, your gear and stats, but as you'll be bringing the gear I'll be showing, or as close to it as possible, this really isn't a factor worth counting here. How much damage you take, because your prayer will drain at 20% of the damage you take, and you will eventually need to yellow Keris to heal back up, further draining your prayer. How good you are at prayer flicking? A lazy flick now and then for Zebak will do just fine. How good you are at keeping your DPS uptime high, and that is the time actually spent hitting NPCs rather than running around and not hitting anything, ultimately extending the fight. And finally, obviously your prayer bonus, but that really isn't a biggie here. When looking to gear, think of it like this. For every item that you bring into the raid, is it worth at least 1 prayer restoring potion? And do you really think you can manage those key points I've just mentioned whilst holding your nerve? If the answer is no, then don't bring it. For this strategy, I'm going to recommend what is the standard rotation for most players, and that is to start off with Zebak, followed by Kephri, which will then leave Akkha and finally Baba to do with smelling salts. This is for 2 reasons. The first is that this is the most familiar raid rotation that players will run in solos and in teams, and the second is that at some point during your journey into the Tombs of Amascut, the vast majority of you will have been exposed to at least some differing boss levels within the varying path leveling invocations, so the mechanics of each boss should not feel like too significant of a step change from a standard expert raid. To put it plainly, in this rotation, if you were to start off with Zebak at level 2 and you're used to running Zebak at level 0 or 1, the fight feels mostly the same. The attacks are just slightly faster and you will have 2 tiles to move between for the tidal waves. However, if I were to recommend killing Zebak last, due to Walk the Path being enabled, the change from a standard raid to a level 4 Zebak is very noticeable. So significant that you will waste a huge amount of time just trying to adapt to the significantly higher rate of attacks and the 1 tile wide openings in the waves, rather than just making the small incremental changes to your playstyle throughout the raid. It really is that simple, just don't try to overcomplicate things. On screen now you'll see a list of all the invocations that you should look to enable. With this setup you're able to avoid enabling the worst of the Akkha invocations whilst also keeping medic off. In the rotation I've just described, this would mean you would start off at Zebak at level 2, Kephri at potentially level 3, then into Akkha at potentially level 3 or 4, and finally Baba at 3 or 4 and above. With this setup you'll be taking double power from the Helpful Spirit, as you will need access to the salts and both adrenaline potions to help you through those oh shit moments, and neither of the other options, either Chaos or Life, will give you access to those. As well as you not being able to make use of the Ambrosia or Nectars because dehydration is enabled. For the gear setup I'm recommending on screen now, it is recommended for a few very specific reasons. I'll touch on them now, but it will become more apparent as I take you through each fight. Firstly, with this setup you're going to use magic as your primary DPS source, so you want to almost literally be bringing max mage. It will allow you to save a very significant amount of prayer at fights like Zebak and during the Wardens fight. And as a side note, at Wardens in Phase 4, you really do want to make use of the extra 1% DPS that the Eternal Boost will give. Secondly, at Kephri, the Justiciar armor set passive effect reduces incoming damage by a percentage based on your defensive bonuses of that style. So in addition to reducing the chance you'll actually be hit, it will always reduce the incoming damage you take and will always reduce the damage by at least 1. So for Kephri, where the Agile Scarabs can feel extremely accurate due to the sheer number of them on you and force you to pray range against them, in this setup you don't need to, again saving prayer. And for Baba, which can hit like a truck through prayer, this now becomes more of a manageable slap. With a crystal range setup, you don't need to bring a twisted bow, an assembler or a blowpipe, which saves you 2 inventory slots and enables you to bring a blessing for the extra prayer bonus. When you're salted, this provides you sufficient DPS to attack Akkha with when you can attack him with range. Even unsalted, it hits high enough to one-shot boulders at Baba. For Wardens, you have a 100% hit accuracy on the Wardens in Phase 2, so even though the damage is calculated slightly different there, it really isn't an issue providing that you can dodge the obelisk attacks as you would do normally. As overly draining is active, a DDS is useless, so bring either a tentacle whip, rapier, salad blade or inquisitor's mace. You want to be on ancient magics and bring the runes for ice barrage and blood barrage, and these will be extremely useful for the monkey room. And finally, I'll state the obvious, a Lightbearer and Blood Fury is a must. The Blood Fury will help manage the attrition rate of your health throughout the raid, and in some cases help to top you back up. The Lightbearer will ensure that your special attack energy regenerates at twice the rate, which should be sufficient to ensure that you stay topped up during the raid, and also ensure in most cases you have enough special attack energy for those oh shit moments. It's time to carry spec. Let me know in the comments below if you want a detailed gear guide for the Tombs of Amascut, and I'll work on one if there is enough interest. There is a lot of min-maxing you can do within the raid to optimise your DPS, maximising your points and increasing the chances of getting those juicy MVP bonuses. Now let's take a look at Zebak. In this fight you'll be using your max mage setup to damage Zebak with. You'll be protecting against the magic and range attacks as you would do normally, just before the projectile hits your character, prayer flicking if you choose to, but you would not be activating augury. This is because it only provides a magic accuracy increase, of which with the setup I've just shown is already as accurate as it can get with a shadow. Augury provides only a 5% DPS increase whilst active. Although the max DPS of a twisted bow is higher, if you were to bring a twisted bow you would need to be praying rigor and bringing multiple additional switches to match the DPS, which is why I don't recommend bringing it here, as you reduce the number of prayer restoring potions that you can bring in. Other than that, the fight is pretty much the same as you would expect. You'll want to start the fight in the areas I'm highlighting on screen now, as these have the lowest chance, if not have no chance, of acid spawning on top of you during the waves or Great Roar. If blood clouds appear next to you, just move as directly as possible to the other side of the room, then return back to this side when they have despawned. You must set your staff to long range to avoid being dragged into the acid pools when dodging the waves, as the gaps between the waves is now only 2 tiles wide, and on occasion the gap may spawn outside of your attack range to Zebak, so make sure you completely stop DPS when this happens and focus on moving through the gap. Put it like this, if you get knocked back into the acid and die, you can't deal damage when you're dead, just focus on surviving. The first wave will always spawn from the south and the second wave will always spawn from the north. The rocks and poisons will always spawn closest to Zebak first, then furthest from Zebak for the final rock and poison spawn. The tidal waves and Great Roar attack will always alternate, but the first one which occurs is always random, so just damage Zebak as you would do normally and do the mechanics as you would do normally. Clicking boss, dodging waves, pushing jugs into the rocks and so on. Once Zebak reaches 25%, he will end rage, and his standard attacks will fire at a much faster rate than before. Now what changes here is that you can, if you want to, pray mage against the blood barrage ability just before the magic or ranged projectile hits your character. Additionally, 2 projectiles will be in the air at any one time, so you will want to position your eyes to focus on the attacks after they explode here and not here. Though the attack immediately shot from Zebak here will give you an indication of the next attack to pray against, you must focus on praying against the attack which has just exploded. Although the fight does take some time, once you have finished Zebak off, you will have ideally used only a few doses of your prayer restoring potions. But if you have used more, don't worry, it takes practice. Don't expect to clear the raid on your first attempt with oodles of supplies. Next we'll move on to Kephri. In this fight you'll near enough be camping your melee setup to damage Kephri with as normal. You'll be dodging firebombs, killing the spawned overlords, but completely ignoring the swarms between the transition phases. In general, the fight is mostly the same, but the key factors you will want to focus on mastering is 1. Dung stacking. This is your ability to know when Kephri is going to use a dung attack and to pre-move towards the walls as best you can to minimise the amount of dung that spawns and leave the room with the maximum amount of space for the remainder of the fight. And the second is maintaining an awareness of your run energy. At level 2 and 3, the firebombs descend at a faster rate than at level 0 and level 1 Kephri. Additionally, as aerial assault is active, the firebombs explode in a 3x3 square, so instead of moving just a single tile away, you'll instead need to move 2 tiles away, but do not get into the habit of running multiple tiles away, as this will really hamper you later in the fight, particularly in the final phase when the dung attacks happen more frequently. You can carry spec to restore your health and run energy to full, but if you choose to do so, just try your best to time it when the fight is under control and when your health and run energy are on the much lower side to make best use of it. You will want to start the fight out by setting up the trap for the soldier scarab, which spawns during the transition phases. Start out on the southern side of Kephri, then move to the first trap tile to drop the dung in a line. Move north to save some run energy rather than running all the way around Kephri. When the eggs spawn, just ignore these. Keep on hitting Kephri until the second dung spawns, then trap the soldier scarab. Do not transition the fight if the second dung line has not been dropped. For any subsequent dung attacks, you'll want to move to roughly the tiles I've indicated on screen now. This helps to minimise the amount of dung that spawns. As you get knocked back, the agile scarabs will begin to cluster, usually on top of each other. So as you progress through the fight, if you need to heal, activate your protect from range, switch into your magic gear, and bludge barrage them for health. But nope. In a solo, a maximum of 5 agile scarabs will spawn, and once you've reached that maximum, no more eggs will spawn from the Kephri until there are under 5 agile scarabs. When you push Kephri into the transition phase, ignore the swarms. Activate your protection from range and kill the spitting scarab first, and by the time that's dead, Kephri will have healed to full, and you should be just about ready to kill the soldier scarab. Equip your magic gear, keep protection from range on and kill the soldier. Once that's dead, blood barrage on the agile scarabs to top your health back up if you need to, and at this point you can move back into your melee gear and switch protection from range off. Continue to damage the boss, making your way around to the southern side of the room, ignoring the eggs and agile scarabs until you transition Kephri into the second transition phase. Ignore the swarms again, switch protection range back on and piety, and jump straight onto the arcane scarab with melee. If it jumps away, you can equip your range gear and activate rigor for an attack whilst you move towards the new arcane scarab's location if you want to. Once the arcane scarab is dead, just repeat what you've done before. Kill the spitting scarab, kill the soldier scarab, barrage the agile scarabs if you need health, dodge the firebombs, and stack the dung as best as you can. Once Kephri's shield is finally down, the dung attack will happen much more frequently, so if you're tight on space, keep piety on to speed this phase up, and if everything goes well, you'll still have plenty of space left. It can seem like there's quite a bit going on, but it really is just a click boss and move a few tiles now and then. Just make sure your prayer doesn't drop whilst the spitting scarab is alive, and heal up on the agile scarabs if you need to. So once Kephri is dead, you'll exit the room and need to grab the power pack from the helpful spirit. Now onto Akkha. This is mostly the same as you expect to see in a normal run. You're still going to camp your shadow to kill the shadows of Akkha when they are active, switching back and forwards to Akkha and the next shadow. You'll need to switch styles to kill Akkha according to his protection players, memorise a few tile patterns for memory blast, potentially up to 6 depending on what he is leveled up to, but where you will really need to be careful is in the unstable orb phase. As the damage during the entire fight is unavoidable, you'll need to manage your carry specs throughout the fight so as not to leave yourself with no special attack energy for the final phase. Ideally, you would go into the final phase with full health and with at least one use of your carry spec available, adrenaline potioned up or not. I won't lie to you and tell you that it's going to be a breeze without Butterfly, but doing the Butterfly run tactic does make the fight a bit easier, because you'll clearly be able to minimise how much damage you take from Akkha, and when, where and how many times you will need to use an Adrenaline Potion and a carry spec. But it is still perfectly doable. Just be prepared to use both doses of your Adrenaline Potion and a few more doses of your Prayer Restoring Potions. If you can at least run around to dodge an occasional melee swing, that's fine. Now I personally did the butterfly method, but I did make a butchers of it during my runs because of my nerves, taking the occasional hit and also just completely standing still during the trailing orb attack, which I do recommend. I'll give you a quick demo of what you need to do, as it's not as complex as what people make out. 100% you can min-max a few aspects, which I do know how to do, but I don't want to make this more overcomplicated than it needs to be. Just understand that it fixes itself whichever direction you run in if you get hit. Just focus on running around. You'll want to mark these tiles on screen now and begin to run around Akkha in any direction you want. clicking on these tiles if you want to go clockwise, and clicking on these tiles if you want to go anti-clockwise. You will only want to attack Akkha on these tiles, and if you get hit and Akkha uses an unstable orb, just stand still. You can continue to run around if you want to and feel confident, but it isn't really necessary. What you need to ultimately focus on doing when the shadows of Akkha are up is instantly switching to attack them, as the DPS checks can be brutal if RNG doesn't go your way, and if Akkha is leveled up too unfavourably. If you do find yourself consistently failing the DPS checks, in your Invocation setup, change Feeling Special to Double Trouble, as during the Memory Blast charge up and activation, the timers in the corners of the room stop, which gives you additional time to kill the shadows of Akkha. But note that this does increase the duration of the fight and will drain your supplies more. If you do opt to butterfly, and you find that you keep red clicking the shadow of Akkha, just enable the shift clicks, so you can yellow click through the shadow of Akkha on the side tiles. Ideally, you will have used your first carry spec around the time the second shadow of Akkha dies, ideally leaving you with a full special attack bar to use 2 carry specs, because you will want to make sure that you are adrenaline potioned up for the final phase, or going into the final phase with at least full health and a single carry spec. At all times you must ensure that your prayer is above 65 just in case you tank a double unstable orb, which will leave you with just enough prayer to get that carry spec off. There is no easy way to put this other than saying you just need to practice dodging orbs. What I found that really helped me was the tile indicators for the unstable orbs, as it made it easier to see what direction the orbs were moving in and to predict if it was going to hit me. Some may prefer to use true tile indicators, but not me. This ultimately is probably the hardest part, if not the second hardest part of getting a Cursed Phalanx. Just keep practicing it in the masses and you'll have it down in no time. Now the final demi-boss that's left is Baba. There's nothing new here, just click the boss, dodge shockwaves, dodge rockfalls, and stand next to the boulders to reduce rockfall damage. Kill the boulders, and finally, mind that gap. There really is nothing challenging to dealing with Baba, other than Baba hitting like a truck through prayer, but as you have your Justicia on, it's a breeze. A lot of the RNG aspect of the fight is mitigated through the use of it. You will want to kill the monkeys as they spawn throughout the fight. If your health is low, and the first hit of your fang doesn't kill the monkey, just switch to your Keris to finish it off, and with a Keris that will heal you up for another 12 health. As you're using a Bofa, the attack range is significantly further than a blowpipe, so you'll need to worry less about actually being dragged into boulders. Just be very careful if you want to boulder skip, as unlike the blowpipe, the hit landing on the boulder happens a bit slower with a Bofa. So just play it safe and kill the boulders as they come, moving as you need to. Additionally, one of the reasons to actually bring a Bofa is because it can easily hit a 31, unlike a blowpipe which needs multiple range switches, rigor and salts to be active. Make your way through the fight and hopefully RNG goes your way and you can save that adrenaline potion dose. But don't stress out if you have to use it, you really only need 2 adrenaline potion doses for Wardens. Speaking of which, let's take a look at that fight. Now the mechanics of the fight should feel familiar, so I won't go into detail for each of those. But what I will cover is how to manage the mechanics now. And for the Europeans out there, sorry, but you will want to be activating the Elidness Warden, which means you will have to deal with Zebak and Baba, and yes, it is a thing. North and South Americans seem to prefer Zebak and Baba, whilst the Europeans prefer Akkha and Kephri. It's quite strange. So what you start off by doing is activating the boss, then moving to the eastern side of the room and tanking skulls to around 81 health. If you tank to 75 health, you're dead from the orbs which are about to hit you. So do not tank any more skulls past 81 health. Once you've tanked enough, just step to the side. The orbs will be released from their respective wardens, 45 from the Elidness Warden and 30 from the Tumikans Warden. Once both orbs have damaged you, you must play it safe and use an adrenaline potion and carry spec back up to full health. You may find that your next attacks don't go your way and ultimately have to tank a second set of orbs which will leave you with barely any health and not leave you with enough special attack energy to heal back up after the obelisk dies. So once the obelisk is dead, you'll want to move to, ideally this tile here, and begin attacking the Warden. On this tile, the Warden will not melee you and is an effective spot from which you can dodge the imminent obelisk attacks. Damage is calculated slightly differently for the Wardens, but if you are low on prayer, you can opt to not use either Rigor or Augury here to help save your prayers, as you do have a 100% hit chance on the boss anyway. What you're going to do is a 4-down Warden, so once the core pops out, immediately switch to your melee gear which provides the maximum offensive bonuses, don't bother with a Justicia, switch on Piety and hit the core 6 times with your melee weapon. Once the core has gone back into the Warden, continue to damage it, dodge the obelisk attacks and heal up if you need to. On the second down, just rinse and repeat, you can now hit the core 8 times. Then on the third down, 10 times, and finally on the fourth down you should only need to hit 5 times to finish it off. Don't worry if you've missed a hit or two earlier, as long as you finish the Elidness Warden off on the 4th down, you're cooking on gas. For the final phase, there is really nothing special to do here other than continue to dodge attacks as you would do normally and killing the skulls as you would do normally. If you are low on health, remember that you can use your carries to kill the skulls, which will heal you back up. I think what's critical here is just staying calm. If you get hit, just stop attacking the boss and get back into the rhythm. You're not on a timer. If you find yourself again low on prayer, just keep augury off until the final burn phase. And as a reminder, you only need to pray against Zebak's attacks or projectiles just before they're about to hit you. And as soon as you hear the whistling noise, a boulder will fall on the tile you are currently on. After the skulls have died, if you lose track of what side the next Warden's tile flip is on, just stand at the back of the room and react accordingly. Once you reach the final fourth phase, keep moving and make use of all of the space that is available to you. It is better to dodge a lightning or falling boulder than tank because you want to be tick perfect with your attacks. Remember, it's just taking you an hour to get here and you can't deal damage when you're dead. Keep your prayer above 60 at all times, and if all goes well, you will still have an adrenaline potion dose left going into the final phase to help top you off twice. Ultimately, it does take practice, and the best practice starts now in the runs you're already doing. You already have the skill set, you're just applying what you already know but in a more cautious way. But get ready for those Jad hands again. Now I hope you found this guide or discussion useful. If it has helped you, comment down below and give the video a like. Also consider subscribing if you're not already. I'm also now on occasion streaming on Twitch, so feel free to check out my stream below and also join my Discord where I plan on giving a few giveaways. So peace out guys, and see you in the next one. Yes!